So, hello there, and welcome to a new Night of the Movies podcast. And in this podcast, I talk all things movies and TV, and whenever I want, for about half an hour to an hour, whenever I want. And in this podcast today, I'm doing my spoiler review of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I've now seen twice, and talking about my big problems in the film in more spoilery detail. But before I get to that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, that if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers, but heck, you just don't have the time to watch the full podcast on YouTube, then you can also podcast out audibly on Spotify and Night Movies on that platform. But if you are already listening on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check the podcast out visually on my YouTube channel and Nice Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you are watching or listening to the podcast, if you enjoy the podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe. And, also give me suggestions of things you want me to talk about in the future as well. And maybe give me some suggestions on whether you prefer these style of videos if you watch it on YouTube, or whether you want me to go back to making normal YouTube videos, like normal reviews, not podcast formatted, the way I do it anyway. So yeah, leave me some suggestions and leave me some feedback in the comment section below if you haven't already. But anyway, yes, let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into my spoiler thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, like I've already mentioned, I've seen this film twice now, and the first time I saw it, I liked it. I did. I said that in my non-spoiler review that I did about a week ago now. Was it over a week ago? I can't remember. It's been a couple of days since then. Yeah, I think it's been over a week actually. And I liked the film, like I said, but it was not what I expected whatsoever the first time I saw it. I expected something more in line with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a great movie, so I was not against that whatsoever. But I didn't realise, till about a week before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 came out, I was watching all these videos, and loads of people who were fans of the first Guardians of the Galaxy weren't the biggest fans of the second one, which surprised me, because I'm not somebody who's usually into superhero movies in general. But that second one worked for me, I didn't think the first Guardians of the Galaxy would work for me, and then its sequel worked for me, and the parts of the sequel, actually, which I think are better than the first film. But overall, I think the first film is a superior film, but still, there are a lot of parts of the second film which I absolutely love. But then the third film, though, I was really surprised by how dark it got. Like, I saw the trailers and I knew that it was going to go into Rocket's backstory, how he became Rocket Raccoon and all that sort of stuff. But I didn't know how much was going to go into detail on those aspects. And I was really shocked by that, seeing all the animal cruelty in the film. And that is brave for an MCU film. As far as I know, an MCU film has never really got that dark before. I know MCU films have got dark in the past. From what I remember, Captain America Civil War, I think it was, I've only seen the film once, got quite dark in its beginning, then it becomes more of a light-hearted, generic MCU film in its later stages. But, it starts off quite dark, but Guardians of the Galaxy 3 stays dark throughout most of its runtime. Like, oh my god, the way it cuts back to Rocket's story and how he's almost dying throughout most of the movie. And also, I should say, by the way, spoiler alert, in case I just hit my bike there. But yeah, spoiler alert if you didn't guess it already. But spoiler alert, the way you keep cutting back to Rocket, dying throughout the film, and he's having all these flashbacks to him growing up, it's quite shocking. And it's something you would never get. Well, yeah, you probably would have never gotten in the first two Guardians films. When we didn't get the first two Guardians films. So, what I'm saying, of course, we didn't get them. So, it was a really big surprise for me, because I expected some more joy in there. I expected there to be some more light-hearted, fun action. And don't get me wrong, there is. But it's not nearly as present as it is in the first two Guardians films. It's much more focusing on the dark aspects of the Guardians of the Galaxy members, which we haven't really touched on, more specifically Rocket, and there's a bit on Star-Lord as well. And that's my other thing. I thought that Star-Lord, who was one of my favourite characters, before this film, one of my favourite superhero characters in general, I thought that he was going to have a lot more, joy in the film. I thought the character was going to be more fun to watch. And I still think Chris Pratt plays Star-Lord well, but I also think that the character wasn't as fun to watch in this film as it was in the previous two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And I understand why, because he's upset over Gamora. His Gamora has gone. The Gamora he faces with, the Gamora he's paired with in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is not the same character. She's much more mean and angry. But I just would have liked there to be a bit more joy injected in the film. I think for me, that's particularly exemplified with Star-Lord, because he is now not one of my favourite characters anymore, because I love him in the first two Guardians of the Galaxy films, but he feels very different in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I understand why. I'm just not saying that. I just think that decision wasn't for me. I didn't gel with that decision, if you will. I didn't love that decision, and also I didn't particularly love Gamora in this film on a rewatch. I think the first time around, I was like, oh, I really like this Gamora character. She's tough. She's got her own sense of agency. She's really, really good. And I think Zoe Saldana plays her very well still, because that's a tricky role to do. You're doing something, you're playing a character which you've kind of already played, but it's not that same character, so you have to play a bit differently. And I think, like I said before, Zoe Saldana does a great job playing this new version of Gamora, but the character, for at least, the first half of the film, maybe a bit more, feels a bit one-note. She keeps getting angry at Star-Lord, aka Peter Quill, every single chance she gets. She just keeps getting angry at him. I'm like, you can calm down a bit. I don't understand that's the point of the character now. And yes, she does change later on in the film. There is some character development with that character. But still, it feels a bit one-note. And I would have liked there to be a bit more just done with that character. I mean, she's good in the film, but I think of all the Guardians members in this movie, if you class Gamora as a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, I think she's the weakest member of the Guardians of the Galaxy in this film. But I still think all the other characters have their moments, and I love how the film opens with young Rocket, and you see the High Evolutionary's hand coming for the young Rocket, and then it focuses on his eyes, it goes an extreme close-up on young Rocket's eyes, and then it cuts, it does this dissolve, I think it is, or maybe a fade, into the present Rocket, the quote-unquote present Rocket, when he's wandering around nowhere, which is quite clever when you think about it. He's wandering around nowhere, and he doesn't really know where he's at. So, there's a bit of wordplay there. And I love how in the background, when you're reintroduced to Rocket in present day in the film, you have an acoustic version of Creep by Radiohead playing in the background. I think that was genius in showing the audience, as a whole thing, show, don't tell. It's telling the audience, but not overly explicitly, where these characters' minds are at. It isn't literally saying there's no, exposition, I can't even pronounce that word, there's no exposition explaining, oh, Star-Lord is depressed, Rocket's depressed, Drax and Mantis are kind of brother and sister now. There's none of that. You just get that in little moments in that opening sequence, and I think that's fantastic the way James Gunn did that, the way we introduce the characters at this moment in the story. And I love how you see Rocket depressed. I love how you are reintroduced to this, like I said before, brotherly and sisterly bond between Mantis and Drax. How you introduce to Nebula, how you introduce to Kraglin, I think it is, the one with the whistle sort of thing, where he goes, does that, and he's got a little mini spear. You're introduced to him there. You're reintroduced to Cosmo there as well, and also you are reintroduced to Star-Lord, who is drunk, and I like how that is done. However, one thing I will say is that I didn't love how Star-Lord was just randomly drunk at the start of this film, and then they don't really go into it as the film goes on. Like, I would have preferred there to be a bit more focus on that. Why is he drunk? I mean, we can infer why he's drunk. We're inferring he's drunk because he's depressed about not being with Gamora anymore. But they didn't focus on that much. It's just like they've thrown it in there, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Why is he drunk? Oh, because he's depressed. Oh, yeah, you're gonna do that a bit more of that? Oh, not really. We're just gonna forget about that for the rest of the film, which they pretty much do. And they didn't even introduce that in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special either. I thought that they would have introduced that in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, which would have made more sense and maybe would have provided a bit more of a payoff in the film, but they didn't. And I was a bit, thinking about, the more I think about that, the more I don't like the more I don't like what they do with Star-Lord. That's what I'm saying. The more I don't like what they do with Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, in this film. I don't hate it, but I don't like it that much either. I think it's fine what they do with that character. And I love how that character ends in this film. He goes back and he sees his granddad, and it ties up his storyline from the first Guardians to the third Guardians, making it a somewhat self-contained trilogy. I mean, it's somewhat self-contained trilogy because you need to watch, the likes of Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and even to some degree Thor: Love and Thunder to understand the Guardian story. But, it's still a somewhat self-contained... I can't even say the words. It's still a somewhat self-contained trilogy because you can watch all three Guardians films and still have a good idea of what the story is without having to watch either the latest two Avengers movies or Thor. But still, it could have been... I think that... I like how Star-Lord's story ends, like I said before, but I just wish that his character was more consistent. I understand why he isn't, but I just wish that character was more consistent with the previous two Guardians films. And I wish he had a moment where he broke out into dance, like he does at the end of Guardians 1, or where he just starts having a bit of fun, like at the start of Guardians 2, and they go, "Showtime, a-holes!" It's really, really good, that sort of stuff, in my opinion, in the first two Guardians films. And I wish we got a bit more of that in the Star-Lord character. I like what they did with Drax in this film quite a lot. I like how, at the end, Nebula says, "Your purpose is to be a dad." I think that was really sweet and probably quite an emotional moment for James Gunn, who wrote the script for the film. He wrote and directed this film. And I think that would have been quite emotional for him, because James Gunn, it does say in the credits, the film is dedicated to his dad, who I think he lost in the past couple of years when this film was in production. So that might have been quite emotional for him. I don't know, maybe not, but I do think that that's a really nice way to end the Drax character, because it's not the character you expect. He's literally called the Drax the Destroyer, and then in the third film, in the Guardians trilogy, you realise that he's the most he's just a big softie. That's what I like about that character. That's what you find out in the end. And also, I like how the end Mantis story. I like Mantis in the film. She's never been my favourite Guardians of the Galaxy character. When she was in the second film, I just thought that she was going to be, just some supporting character who ends up getting killed off when Ego, Kurt Russell's villain, starts going a bit crazy. But that's not what happened, and she did end up becoming one of the main Guardians of the Galaxy. Heck, she was even in the old two Avengers movies, and she was in Thor: Love and Thunder as well. But I do like, even so I don't love that character, I love how they end that character, and I like how she's used in the film. I don't think she's the best character again in this film, but I love how they end that character with her going and finding herself. If I was to hazard a guess, I don't think she's going to return in the MCU, because I think Pom Clemente, I'm not pronouncing the actress name wrong, who plays Mantis, likes working with James Gunn. And if you have read news stories recently, I'll talk about this a bit later again in this review, in this podcast, should I say, she likes working with James Gunn quite a lot, and James Gunn is going over to DC. So I would hazard a guess that we're not going to see Mantis come back. I mean, we might, I don't know. But I would hazard a guess we don't. I like how Groot's used in this film. Not my favourite version of Groot. I've got to admit, my favourite version of Groot is his baby Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Partly because, look, it's baby Groot. What's not there to love? It's baby Groot. I just love how he's dancing to Mr. Blue Sky at the start of Guardians 2. And he dances a bit towards the end of this film, you know, when you have the Dog Days Are Over on, when that song's playing towards the end. But yeah, he's a good. I like this Groot, but I don't love this Groot again. Rocket, I think it's his movie. It's clearly his film. You know, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I think, is probably more Gamora's movie. The second Guardians of the Galaxy is definitely Star-Lord's film. It's all about his father and whose father really is. You know, it's Yondu in the end. And also, this Guardians of the Galaxy film is all about Rocket. And I really liked how they focused in on that. I do still think, and I said this in my first review, that the film is uneven in its tonal changes. It goes from moments of comedy to moments of really dark and serious moments with all the animal cruelty stuff, which is really shocking at some moments. But I do think that could have been better. That's what I'm saying. I do think those tonal shifts could have been done better, because sometimes you are so shocked by the animal cruelty and all the testing and everything like that, you know, in all those times which happen in the film. And you're so shocked by that, and then it cuts to a moment which you're meant to find funny, but you don't find as funny as you would do because you're still in shock from those animal cruelty sequences and those animal experiments happening literally moments before in the film. And I do think James Gunn still needs to work on his comedy balance in his movies. I'm not saying, you know, it's done badly, but it could have been done better. And I do think the comedy in this film is less balanced and more unevenly balanced than it is in the previous two Guardians. I even think the comedy in the Suicide Squad, which he also directed, is better balanced. And I do like Rocket's story, but I do wonder that maybe it would have been more emotional for me, because I didn't find it's an emotional story, don't get me wrong, but I didn't find it quite as emotional as I'm hearing some other people did. You know, I remember watching the film the first time in the cinema and seeing someone in the room fun crying, and I was like, I want to cry right now. You know, it was in a moment where you think Rocket's about to die, he's in his heaven, you know, he's in his heaven and he sees Lila, the otter. You think he's about to die. It was otter or seal, I never really know which one's which, you know. I always get otter and seal mixed up, but I think it's a seal. I'm pretty sure it's a seal, or it might be an otter. I'm not entirely sure. Let's say it's an otter. But he sees Lila the otter, and he gets quite emotional, and then she goes, you know, it's not your time to go. But the first time I saw the film in the cinema, there was someone in the room in front of me crying, and I was thinking, I want to cry. Why am I not crying? And I think the reason that I didn't cry, even so I love the Guardians of the Galaxy films, I've spoken about this at length on past YouTube videos, is that the balance was a bit messy for me. And it was still messy the second time, you know, because I was wondering when the next piece of comedy was going to be inserted into the film, because that's just James Gunn's sensibilities, and sometimes they work, like in the case of the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that is still his masterpiece. I think that's still his best film to date, but then sometimes they don't. Like, I don't think his comedy balance really worked to the best of its ability here. I do think if you toned down some of the comedy and focused more seriously on these characters, it would have worked better. But then saying that, like I said before, you know, I wanted there to be more joy into the film, and how do you inject joy into the film? Through comedy. So I don't know, it's always, you know, I think it was a bit of a lose-lose situation, because you were going to have those dark moments with Rocket's backstory, but because you also wanted to have comedic moments, because James Gunn wanted to have comedic moments in the film, because it's a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, you were always going to have that problem in some sort of capacity. So it's a bit of a lose-lose situation, although I think the balance is okay. I just think it could have been done better. And also, on the topic of killing off characters, you know, I went into this film expecting them to kill off Rocket, and they didn't. And you know why I expected that? Because of the marketing. In all the trailers, it was implying Rocket's gonna die. James Gunn was coming out and saying, "Oh, I love Rocket so much. He's he's my favorite Guardians of the Galaxy character, and I'm so sad. I get so sad making this film because we're diving into Rocket's backstory." And he was implying quite a lot in all the interviews he did, you know, leading up to the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and surrounding the release of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, that Rocket was going to die. And he didn't. And I was surprised by that, and part of me really likes that decision because I think the marketing was genius on all the trailers. It was implying that, and I was like, "Oh, Rocket's gonna die." I'm half expecting that when I went to go and watch the film the first time. I was half expecting Rocket to die, but then he didn't. But then a part of me doesn't love that decision, and this is my big spoilery problem with the film. It isn't ruthless enough in its decision making. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't kill any of the main characters, any of the main Guardians of the Galaxy films. Heck, any of the main Guardians of the Galaxy films, I mean any main Guardians of the Galaxy members. Heck, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 kills off more members of the Guardians of the Galaxy than this film does. It killed off Yondu, who's one of the main characters in the first two Guardians films. And this Guardians film doesn't do that. I thought, going into the film, because the actors had spoken about how this is their last time playing those characters, I thought Gamora might die, because Zoe Saldana has said now that this is the last time she's going to play Gamora. I thought Dave Bautista was going to die. I thought Drax was going to die, should I say. I thought Drax was going to die because Dave Bautista has spoken about the fact that this is his last time playing Drax the Destroyer. I also thought Rocket might die because of all the James Gunn interviews that he's been doing, talking about Rocket. And also the fact that I'm pretty sure, Bradley Cooper has come out and said this is his last time voicing Rocket. And so I was expecting these characters to die. And they didn't. Now, I don't know what they're going to do in the future. Maybe we'll see Gamora again. My guess is we're not going to see Gamora again. My guess is, she goes over the Ravagers. And if they ever do something with the Ravagers in the future in the MCU, they're going to say, oh, Gamora is off doing some mission on some random planet in the middle of nowhere. I don't mean no other planet, by the way. I just mean in the middle of wherever in the galaxy. And if they bring Drax back, I could see Dave Bautista maybe doing a cameo as Drax in the future, although even that I don't think is likely. So if they do bring Drax back, I think they will recast him. And I think they will bring the character back because of the way they left the character. But I think they'll recast him. And, if Dave Bautista don't want to do anymore, that gives another actor the opportunity to play quite a fun character, so that's all cool. And, as for Rocket, I dare say there's a lot of people who can do a voice impression of Rocket, so I do think there's a chance that these characters all come back. I don't think it's likely, but I do think there's a chance these characters all come back. But I'm just surprised they didn't kill off more characters. I wanted it to be more brave and bold in its decision making of killing off characters because it's the final Guardians of the Galaxy film. Half of me expected some of these characters to die because James Gunn is saying this is the final film with this iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I was like, okay, so it's the final in the trilogy. That's what James Gunn's been saying. And most of the time in the final film of the trilogy, characters die, and I expected that to happen, and then it didn't. And so part of me is like, oh, I'm happy it did that because it wasn't what I expected. But then part of me is like, it wouldn't have been more emotional and sad in the end, and wouldn't the ending feel more like a finale if more Guardians of the Galaxies died? Like, if more Guardians of the Galaxy members died, because that's what usually happens at the end of a trilogy, and it would have closed it off more, it would have closed it off nicely if just more characters died. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't get me wrong, I didn't want characters to die, but that's often when it comes at the best time where you don't want a character to die, and because you love that character so much, but the character still dies, and I wish that happened. I wish it was more bold and killed off more Guardians. It killed off any Guardians of the Galaxy members, in fact, because then it would have felt more like a finale rather than, oh, this is the end for now, because that's what it feels like. Star-Lord is still about, Rocket's still about, Gamora's still about, Drax still about, Nebula's still about, Groot's still about, and so on and so on and so on. These characters are still alive. They can come back. So for me, the end of this film doesn't feel like a goodbye, like, say, the end of Return of the Jedi does, like, say, the end of Lord of the Rings Return of the King does, like, say, the end of Indiana Jones and Last Crusade does. No, it just feels like, we'll see you guys again soon. Funny enough, some of the examples I just mentioned there, Return of the Jedi and Last Crusade did get sequels further down the line, but if you take those sequels out that they got, they still feel like this is goodbye. When you watch in Return of the Jedi, it feels like this is goodbye. When you watch the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it feels like a goodbye. What's this film? I hate to say it, but it doesn't. It doesn't feel like a goodbye. It feels like we'll see you guys again soon, because that's the MCU for you. You know, that might be an MCU problem. That might be a Kevin Feige, you know, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios. That might be a note from him going, make sure you don't kill all these characters, because I might want to bring them back in, I don't know, the next Avengers film or a future Guardians of the Galaxy movie or something like that. Because don't be wrong, you know, they will probably do more Guardians of the Galaxy movies or more movies revolving around the Guardians of the Galaxy members, but it might not be called Guardians of the Galaxy 4, and it's not going to have James Gunn's involvement anymore. And I don't know how that's going to turn out. So we can hear tracks outside, by the way. But I don't know how that's going to turn out if James Gunn's not involved. I'm going to be honest, I don't care about Guardians of the Galaxy whatsoever in the future if it's got no involvement from James Gunn. And it won't do, because James Gunn's going over to DC, which I'm looking forward to. But, you know, if James Gunn's not involved in Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't care about those films. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't care about the Guardians of the Galaxy going forward if James Gunn's not involved. That's how I feel about that. But yeah, the end of this film for me didn't feel like the end. It felt like a goodbye finale. You know, and I wish it felt like a proper finale instead of, we're just going to leave these characters the way they are. They can come back, but we're just going to leave these characters the way they are. And I wish it could have more Guardians, because perhaps then it would have provided that finale feel. Because then the Guardians couldn't come back together. Like, when you think about it, they can still come back together if they want to. There is still probably a version of a story in the future where these characters can come back together if they want to. Whilst, say, if you killed off, I don't know, Nebula or Mantis or Drax or any of the Guardians of the Galaxy, then that couldn't happen. But right now it can still. You know, I'm not in love with that idea, but that's just me. And also, I think it should have been more ruthless in what it cuts out this film. Like, I spoke about this in my non-spoiler review, sorry, that the film is baggy in some parts, and pardon me there, the film is a bit baggy in some parts because there are sections of the film which I do think aren't needed. That the whole stuff with Counter-Earth, I think, is such a James Gunn thing. You know, when they go onto that planet and there's always people wearing human clothes, but they're not people, but the animals wearing human clothes. You know, I think that section of the film is fine, but it doesn't really add much to the movie. I don't really understand what that was meant to be doing. So I think that section could have been taken out and the film could have been 2 hours and more tight and more to the point. There's also other sections of the film which involve poo jokes and toilet jokes, which I'm really not a fan of. You know, I'm not 9 years old anymore. You know, I'm sick of poo jokes and toilet jokes, and also dick jokes in James Gunn movies. Like, I remember in The Suicide Squad, there was a dick joke in that film which I really despised. Even though I quite enjoy that film overall, you know, I despised that joke to death. And in this film, there's a moment where, after Gamora has pushed Star-Lord into these computers and got really angry at him, there's a moment after where Star-Lord is just listening to his Peter Quill, is just listening to his music, and Drax and Mantis come to console him, and then they're talking about analogies, and Drax says he had a poo, and it was like an analogy, and honestly, I was sitting in the cinema like this the first time. Ugh. I was sitting there in the cinema with my head in my hands, because I really didn't like that joke. And I don't like poo jokes as well. And there's a moment later on in the film where Gamora is on the toilet. And part of me, you know, thinks when I was watching that scene, thought, oh, so, you know, I kind of like what James Gunn is doing there. He's showing us that, yes, superheroes still go to the toilet. But then a part of me is thinking, no, it's just James Gunn making a poo joke. Making a toilet joke, whatever. It doesn't really work. I don't like that sort of stuff. And, yeah, I'm hoping he tones down on that in future movies, because he keeps doing it in his films. He did it in the second Guardians of the Galaxy. I remember there was a big poo joke during some big action set piece in that film, and I think there was some dick joke in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, though it kind of worked in that film because that was the first time I'd heard James Gunn do that. But he needs to tone down on poo jokes, toilet jokes, and dick jokes in his movies. I just don't think they work. But, you know, that's just my sense of humour. All sense of humour is subjective, and, yeah, that's just the way I feel about that. And also, Adam Warlock seems to be the talk of the town with criticism with this film, from what I'm hearing. I think Will Poulter was a great actor who played him. I don't think Will Poulter uses, I don't think his talent is on show in this film. I think he's playing it a bit too comically, and I don't really like that character really in the film. I think his induction, the more I think about it, comes out of nowhere. You have Crazy on You by Heart playing, and I'll talk about the music in a sec, but Crazy on You by Heart is playing, and then Adam Warlock comes in, and I'm like, oh, this is coming out of nowhere. Adam Warlock was teased, I think, if I remember, at the end of Guardians 2, and it feels like they just had to put him in this film. It feels almost like it was an afterthought. James Gunn wrote the script and realised, oh, Adam Warlock isn't actually in this, so he just write him in there. That's what it felt like. And I'm not sure if it worked. I liked how in the first post-credit scene, he is now part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But I also don't like how his character then is just set up for future films or future appearances that he may have in future projects in the MCU. I don't care about that. I said this in my first review of this film, that this is your final MCU film for me, at least for now. If I hear The Great again, if I hear the TV shows are great again, like if I hear Secret Invasion is great, I'll watch it. If I hear The Marvels is brilliant, I'll watch it as well. But for me, I'm just tired of the MCU, so I'm giving it a rest, at least for a good long while. And so I don't care about future setups. I don't care if Adam Warlock is going to come back in future movies. Good for Will Poulter, because he'll have more acting to do, he'll have a job. But I don't care if he comes back. So, the thing is, I did not like that setup. Just make the character is what it is. And it feels like, especially when I watched it the second time, that they're just setting that character up. That's all it is. And also, on the topic of the music, like I briefly mentioned before, I don't think the soundtrack this time around, as in, the needle drops use of songs, is as good as it is in the previous two Guardians films. Like, I loved the use of, 70s and 80s music. I think it was mainly 70s, actually, in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And in this film, it isn't just 70s music anymore. It ranges from all these different decades of music, and some of that worked for me, some of that didn't. I didn't love some of the needle drops, like when In the Meantime is played. It just came out of place for me. It was just felt out of place and didn't really work. Same as Since You've Been Gone by Rainbow. And Since You've Been Gone is one of my favourite songs, but I don't think it worked where it was placed in the film. I don't think the needle drop particularly worked Since You've Been Gone. And also, there was just moments of songs, moments where songs were used in the film, like I mentioned before, with Crazy on You, where I don't think the needle drop was particularly needed, and James Gunn inserted it because he got creative freedom or something like that. Because I do feel that, he was let out on a leash. What it says in my non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but he was let off his leash with the film, and so he was allowed to do what he wanted. And I don't think all the needle drops totally worked where they were placed. I think some needle drops work great in the film, like the use of Dog Days Are Over at the end, or No Sleep Till Brooklyn by Beastie Boys, in that one huge and, spectacular hallway fight scene. And also, I like the use of Creep by Radiohead, the acoustic version, at the start of the film. But I'm still a bit iffy on some of these song choices and where they were placed. I think they could have been done a bit better and more smoother, and maybe there should have been a bit more polish with the editing and the way the needle drops were into the film. And also, sticking on music, I'm not a big fan of the score for this film. In fact, I don't think the score is that good. I think it's a bad score because it's not Tyler Bates. Tyler Bates did the score for the first two Guardians of the Galaxy films, and he did some really great scores for those films. I mean, they're over the top and, they're big orchestral scores, but they work because there's a sense of oomph with those, scores for the previous two Guardians of films. There isn't with this score. It's done by John Murphy, who did the score for the Suicide Squad, and did some really good music for that film. Like, the theme for Ratcatcher 2 in the Suicide Squad is great. I don't think his score for this movie is good though. There's no memorable themes whatsoever, and that Tyler Bates Guardians of the Galaxy theme, which I became affectionate towards with the previous two Guardians of the Galaxy films, is not really in this film. It's used one moment where Rocket goes a bit crazy in a spaceship, but that's really it. And I was a bit disappointed by the score, I must admit. It just sounds like a generic comic book superhero score. It doesn't sound that unique, and I was disappointed by that. And like I said before, although I liked the soundtrack, I think the song choices could have been better. But one thing I was wrong with in my first review of the film, in my non-spoiler review of the film, was the High Evolutionary. I do think he's a good villain. I said the first time that, I didn't think the villain was that good and that he was the worst of all the three Guardians of the Galaxy villains. I think on a rewatch, he's better than the villain for the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. My favourite villain in all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies is still Kurt Russell as Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Probably just because of Kurt Russell and the way he plays that character. I think that's a really interesting villain, at least in my opinion. But I do think this villain is really good, though. I do think the High Evolutionary is great. The actor who plays him, I can't pronounce his name. I had a look at trying to pronounce it this morning. Failed miserably. So, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I do think he's a good villain. I think the actor plays him very well. I do like the way he's inserted in the film as well. I think that he is quite interesting with the way the actor plays his menacing side. Like, he shouts quite a lot, and in a way, he's a bit of a mustache twirling villain, but I also like the way that when he's menacing, you feel how menacing he is. And also, I just made a note over here, and I almost forgot to mention this. One thing which I was really surprised by was how this Guardians of the Galaxy movie, its plotting and its storytelling is actually quite similar to the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. And like I said before, I expected this one to be more similar to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in terms of its storytelling. I was wrong. It's more similar to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, which I'm fine with, but I wish it went more unique direction and more unique storytelling, and did something different in its plotting. Because in the end, both Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, they start off with the Guardians of the Galaxy members kind of separated. In the first film, they are separated. They come together later on. In the third film, though, they're not really together as a team at the start of the movie. And then they have to come together from different areas. Gamora comes from a different part of the galaxy in this point in this film. And then they have to go and do a heist, which is doing both movies. And then there's a lot of, turmoil and angst between the Guardians of the Galaxy members. Happens in both Volume 1 and Volume 2. And Volume 3, sorry. I meant to say Volume 3 there. And then also, as the film goes on, the villain blows the world or causes terror on some other, non-existential planet or something like that. And yeah, the villain does some big evil thing, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy members come together and end up in some big CGI battles saving the galaxy. The plotting and the storytelling is basically the same for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I didn't love that. One of the aspects I love about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is that it's different from Volume 1. You basically just hang out with the Guardians, and I love that about it, and it's a father-son story. But in this film, it's a breakup movie, but I wish it focused on that more instead of doing all this stuff with the big CGI action sequences, the heist, yet again, we did that in the first film, and it just feels very familiar, and maybe a bit too familiar, if I'm being honest. Maybe a bit too familiar in its storytelling, because I want something different. And also, James Gunn seems to be obsessed with heists. He's done it with the first Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad, and in this film as well. And I don't think all of them really work that well. Actually, no, I don't know what I'm saying, no. No, I'm wrong. No, the heist in the first Guardians of the Galaxy works really well. What I'm saying is, I wish there wasn't a heist in this film. And I wish the plotting was different and the storytelling was different, and I wish it didn't feel too familiar and like he'd already done it. It feels a bit tired. It feels a bit like James Gunn was ready to leave the Guardians of the Galaxy films. I mean, there's parts, you can argue that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 feels like James Gunn is tired of telling these stories now with the Guardians of the Galaxy members, but then you can also argue otherwise. Like, you can argue just in its storytelling, that is very familiar, and James Gunn is tired of these characters, but then through the fact that there is so much focus on some of these characters, especially Rocket, that James Gunn is still in love with these characters. So there's an argument on both ends there. I don't think myself that James Gunn is tired with these characters, but I also think he's ready to move on. Like, he's not bored of these characters, but he was ready to move on once, he's ready to move on with his characters. That's what I'm trying to say there. I hope you understand what I mean. But like I said before, and going back on what I was saying, I wish this film was different in its storytelling, and I wish that it just focused on the characters breaking up. I just wish it focused on the fact that this is a breakup movie for the Guardians of the Galaxy members, because it feels like that's what it is at the end, but it feels like they just kind of put it in the end, and that isn't really put in until the end. They could have, hinted at that early on in the film, but they don't. And I wish that was done a bit better. And I wish they focused on the fact that it is a breakup movie and not just a movie about the Guardians of the Galaxy coming together. Because there's one scene where Quill says, this is it, I'm leaving the Guardians at the end of the movie. But I would have liked that idea to maybe be hinted at throughout the film. I mean, it is because of lots of mentions to Quill's grandfather, but still, it wasn't one of the main focuses, and I would have liked it to be one of the main focuses. This is an add-on, by the way. One thing I forgot to mention when I was actually doing my spoiler review of this film was my ranking. And if you haven't guessed it already, it goes, for me, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, the second Guardians of the Galaxy, and the third Guardians of the Galaxy. I love that first Guardians of the Galaxy so much. It's my favourite comic book movie / my favourite superhero film of all time. And the second Guardians of the Galaxy for me is still brilliant. I love it. And this film is still good, but I don't love it. So that's my ranking. And I'd probably say, if you want me to inject this as well, I'd probably say that for me, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special is now beneath Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, like I said before, for me, the ranking goes Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. Anyway, back to the podcast. And I like the film still, especially after a second watch. I enjoyed it a lot more, actually. I don't know if I've already mentioned that, because it's been going now for almost 40 minutes. Let's just have a look. Oh no, over 40 minutes now. I didn't realise how long I've been going on for. I do ramble on. But I do like the film, and I enjoyed it a lot more the second time. I just wish I loved it still, because it isn't as self-referential as the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies. There's no references to the fact that they're, the first two films don't really do this, but, there's no aspects we can really touch on and go, oh, they're sort of making from the comic book genre, but they're also conforming to making a good comic book film, like the first two Guardians of the Galaxy movies do, and I wish we had that a bit more. I also wish that the film was more balanced in its tone and didn't go so dark and so comedic and have those moments placed right next to each other. I also wish I cried, and I didn't have that. And I also wish that James Gunn tried something different in its storytelling, its plotting on this movie, and I wish he tones down on some more of the, immature jokes going forward as well. And there are parts of the film which I just really wish I liked more, to put it politely. The parts of the film, if I'm putting it impolitely, that I just don't like, that I think rub me up the wrong way. However, the film is still fun to watch, and it's still got this great energy in there, this James Gunn energy that you only really get with his movies, whether it's Super, Slither, the first Guardians of the Galaxy, the second Guardians of the Galaxy, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, from what I've seen of that show, and also this film, and hopefully he puts that energy into Superman Legacy, which he's doing next. He's doing a Superman film next. He's going back over to DC. He's now leading DC, and he's starting to lead DC with a Superman movie going forward. And my God, I hope that Superman movie is great. And I'm looking forward to that Superman movie quite a lot, because James Gunn has come out and said that his Superman film that he's directing, Superman Legacy, which is going to come out in 2025, is not going to be a comedy. And I'm really looking forward to that, because even so, I like James Gunn's humour for the most part. I've enjoyed it for the most part. It's starting to wear off of me, and don't get me wrong, I'm fine with there's comedy in his Superman film, but I want it just to focus less on its comedic element, and I want it also to not feel so James Gunny, not feel so James Gunn-esque, his Superman movie, like this Guardians of the Galaxy film has felt, and like the Suicide Squad felt as well. And I'm looking forward to perhaps having a Superman movie in the style of the first Guardians of the Galaxy, something like that. I mean, maybe not as similar to the first Guardians of the Galaxy, because then in a way, in many ways actually, that first Guardians of the Galaxy is a comedy, and so it'd be kind of contradicts myself if I said that. But I want it just to have a sense of joy in there, which this film didn't have as much for me. So I'm hoping that Superman Legacy delivers on what I missed and what I wanted from this film. And even so I don't love this movie, like I said before, I'm still looking forward to see what James Gunn does next. I'm still really looking forward to a Superman film, because I think it's going to be miles better than Man of Steel, which was so dull and so dark and honestly boring. I hate using that word, but it's the truth when it came to Man of Steel for me. And I'm hoping his movie is full of light, full of fun, and really plays off what made the first Guardians of the Galaxy so great, and doesn't focus on what so many people are admiring about this third Guardians of the Galaxy film, because even so I enjoy this film, I don't think it's as great as the first film. But I've been rambling on way too much. So for me, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is it's a good movie. I enjoy it. It's really entertaining, but the parts of the film you could easily cut out. I wish it was more bold in its storytelling, and I wish that it was better. But I still enjoyed it, and heck, I'm going to take that with me. That's a win for me with this film. And so, all in all, I'm still going to say that Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I'm not changing my rating, so I'm going to keep my rating and say that it's a 7.5 out of 10. Oh yeah. So, anyway, guys, that's it for the podcast today. Thank you, as always, watching or listening, wherever you've been watching or listening to the podcast. And also, look forward to many podcasts coming soon on this channel. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like, subscribe wherever you are watching or listening to the podcast. And also, yeah, just look forward to more videos, I suppose, and more podcasts coming very, very soon. Like I said before, I don't know whether to do more normal YouTube videos in the future or to stick with these podcasts. I'm a bit unsure right now, so I've been doing more podcasts on the YouTube channel. If you are watching on the YouTube, I've been doing more podcasts on here at the moment, but I might start doing more normal YouTube videos again in the future. I'm just not sure right now, because these are easy to do with what I want to do elsewhere right now. I'm not going to go into detail there. I'll save that for a future podcast. Look forward to me rambling on about something else in a future podcast. But yeah, right now I'm going to stick with the podcast, and as of now, at least until June, which I say June as if it's a couple of months away, it's a couple of weeks away. No, at least until June, though, I'm going to stick with doing these podcasts. But until then, guys, like I said before, thank you as always for watching. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. And I suppose this is it. So, I will see you guys again soon. But, bye for now. Bye.